This is a special video, and it's because I really don't like sharing my personal life online. But you know, I just got engaged with my golden pair, INTP, and I have also dated quite many NTPs actually in the past. So this video is not based on like one experience I have, but rather kind of the patterns that I have noticed with dating these types. I might provide some information to you guys that you might find valuable about just like dating your golden pair, as well as about like ENTJs and INTPs. So I'm not gonna be calling this like golden pair, but everyone understands what I mean by that. So in this video, I will be discussing what are the strengths and weaknesses of kind of finding or dating or being married to a person who has literally the opposite cognitive functions than you. ENTJs have extrovert thinking and introvert intuition as their first two functions. What that really means is that we like to externalize the logic, we like to discuss thoughts with people, and we like to really theorize things, but also from a really abstract perspective, or like to understand things as concepts and phenomenons rather than just the tangible information. And naturally, ENTJs really are decision makers, so it's really important for ENTJs to be moving forward or feel like they're moving forward and be making decisions and kind of action in real life. So it's really all about like finding the right momentum, creating structure over things, like externalize the logic in some sense, and also have a direction, have an understanding of what you're really going towards and what are the actions required to really achieve that. And for an INTP, when it comes to their first two functions, it's the introverted thinking. So they like to internalize the logic, and the extroverted intuition, which is like trying to look things from multiple perspectives and really trying to understand things rather than like just execute them. So what INTPs care about is more like accuracy. What you're saying, does it really make sense, or is it coherent with your patterns? Like if I have seen you doing multiple different things, it's really coherent that you're telling me something different now. And then also exploring possibilities, because INTPs don't like to be kind of restricted in some sense or have constraints when it comes to the possibilities and the freedom of trying multiple different options, or at least exploring them abstractly, if anything. So ENTJs and INTPs are both really rational, logical types, but we think in different ways, and our pace of thinking is also really different. I personally think I have always been drawn to introvert thinking users, and the extrovert intuition is just such an amazing addition to that, because it's not just introvert thinking, but it is actually introvert thinking with the perception of how many different ways we can look at it. So in the sense, I have always been drawn to introvert thinking users, but the difficulty really is that the extrovert thinking user really tries to execute on things, it really tries to move things forward, and it really tries to find things to be actionable. And an extrovert thinking user easily sees things as like a list of actions, a list of tasks. And that's kind of the difficulty, because the introvert thinking users wants to understand them and really create a holistic system or theory where everything makes sense. And it can take a really long time for that to form. The introvert thinking user might feel like they don't know enough when they have gathered so much information, when on the other hand, extrovert thinking users can be overly confident when they really don't know that much. So the introvert thinking user, or the INTPs, can really see the ENTJs as kind of overly confident, arrogant in that way, and also pushy, because they really want things to move on. And the ENTJ, if they are judging the INTP from the external, it can really look like slow, kind of not that smart, because you don't kind of get it. You're like, why are you taking so long to think about this? Some things are just common sense. The introvert thinking user does not think what's common sense. They want to actually understand it. So like for an ENTJ, it can look like they're just slow, you know, or dumb. But obviously that's not true. So that can really be the negative side of things. But if you can reinforce the positive way these functions can support each other, it's everything else. The extrovert thinking user can push the introvert thinking to do actions, to force deadlines, and to really fulfill tasks, so that their introvert thinking can really also create implications in real life. And the introvert thinking provides so much depth to the extrovert thinking user. And it's not just that, it's also the introvert intuition and extrovert intuition, because the introvert intuition is about what I want and what do I perceive and what do I really see to be true in the future. And the extrovert intuition can really provide depth into that. Look into these different ways these things can unfold. Let's not do things for the sake of decision, but actually Let's reflect on those. So the introvert intuition is always questioning the extrovert intuition, you know? It can always be like, are you sure? Like what you're saying is true. Are you sure? And the extrovert thinking user is kind of forced to make internally consistent logic at all times, because the extrovert thinking wants to discuss those things. The extrovert thinking is the externalizer. So when that criticism comes, in its worst way, if the ENTJ is in a protective mode, where it's not ready to receive that criticism, it can really become an aggressive situation, honestly. INTPs don't criticize personally. I really mean that. Like, the INTP could not care what you personally believe. Like, they just want to see if what you're saying makes sense. They just want to see if your logic is consistent. They don't have that kind of personal layer because their extrovert feeling is so low and their introvert feeling even lower. So in a way, if the ENTJ takes what INTP is saying personally, it can create a negative loop. But if the ENTJ is willing to take what the INTP is saying without the personal aspect, because the introverted feeling function is just much more personal. Introvert feeling users always think things are personal when they are always not. If the ENTJ is ready to receive criticism, it's an amazing combination. Because when things don't get personal and you can actually grow and understand that, okay, without me thinking, extrovert thinking always knows what to do next and be like executing, let's actually think about this. Let me think myself if I make sense and have that reflection time. It's so helpful and it's so useful. And I think I have kind of developed my unconscious INTP-ness in the sense that I have had to formulate my own thoughts. I have had to really make sure I am internally logically consistent. As a short summary, the ENTJ helps the INTP really to act on things, and the INTP helps the ENTJ to refine things, to be more like accurate or coherent. Okay, the second tension point we have is definitely like introvert intuition and extrovert intuition. And I would say the perception functions, perceiving functions, intuition, and sensing. Always when it comes to a romantic relationship are always important functions, because a lot of these kind of things we think as physical attraction come from the perceiving functions. Introvert intuition, the ENTJ wants clear direction. It wants to execute and narrow options. It's like, these options, these are too much. Let's focus on this thing. Let's focus on what matters. Extrovert intuition INTPs are seeking possibilities, wanting to open the doors, not close them. Check what the other doors might tell us. Sees multiple different outcomes with single decisions. So, as you can hear, there is possibility for friction again, but always when there is possibility for friction, there is so much potential for growth. Because now the ENTJ can prevent the endless ideation, kind of like overly analyzing things, overly checking new things, and actually moving forward and giving meaning. ENTJs can provide a meaning or a direction for INTPs because they struggle with that. They truly do. And ENTJ can really be that, almost like a mentor or coach in a way that like, hey, these things you want to be achieving, these things you really want to work towards. And INTPs who figure out their introvert intuition or grow that function, they really become the executors because they realize the clarity of their vision. But on the other hand, the INTP forces the ENTJ to have clarity in their vision. In the sense that if you don't have clarity, the ENTJ just wants things because momentary wants, you know? Like seeking actually pleasure or seeking maybe things that are not that meaningful. Like for example, they're just seeking validation for their extrovert thinking. The INTP calls those out. The INTP is like, hey, why do you want this thing? Like there's 10 million different opportunities, or there's more philosophical way of looking at this. Why do you want that thing? Why is it important? It forces reflection and growth. But okay, sensory functions, like it's literally like having different bodily, physical languages, you know? Extrovert sensing ENTJs are trying to look at things, how people are acting, what's tangible, what's reality, like reality checks. Introvert sensing is like, how does this information relate to what I already know works? Sometimes even like details and procedures, how things should be done. And even like having strong sense of duty sometimes. Depends on the INTP. If they have developed introvert sensing, they might have a really strong sense of obligation. So the ENTJ can look like aggressive in the way because they are momentary. They are decisive in the moment. They want tangible results. They do actions because they want those tangible results. But also they are engaged in the moment. Like they might like momentary sensory pleasures. The INTP can't relate to that really. It's like, for example, just in a bar, if you're like in a club like dancing, like INTP could not be more out of place. It's like, why am I here? I'm not enjoying this. Because the INTP has extrovert sensing trickster or the blind spot. They can enjoy, of course, the momentary pleasure because it makes themselves in their internal reality feel good, or this kind of overindulgence in things. But they don't really look at the present moment and the physical environment and enjoy it as it is. And the introvert sensing users seek predictability and consistency. They want procedures and they look at their past as knowledge and data, and they really want things to stay consistent in that way. The ENTJs are full of energy. INTPs are the opposite. They get tired. Their energy is consumed. They don't have more energy. And so again, possible tension point, right? But the most amount of growth a person could have comes from a person who is literally the opposite in the cognitive functions. The introvert sensing provides structure and consistency and predictability for the ENTJ. That's what they can do, by the way, if they are more developed. If they are not developed, introvert sensing can look really different. It can look more like laziness, and it can really look like overindulgence, not actually being responsible for the structure that they have created. INTP can, in the best way possible, really provide that kind of structure, provide the groundwork for the ENTJ, because the ENTJ is spending energy. The ENTJ doesn't know how to conserve energy. The INTP is teaching the ENTJ to conserve the energy, to create a sustainable starting point, so that you're not just running around and doing things for the sake of doing them, but actually thinking like, where do I come from? What's my foundation? When I go home, what does my home look like? You know, ENTJs couldn't give a shit. They don't care about these kind of procedures. And what does the ENTJ do to INTP? In the best way possible, they're pushing the INTP to live their life, to enjoy their present moment, to have memories worth of thinking about. When the extrovert sensing respects introvert sensing and vice versa, the ENTJ is making their life more livable, more enjoyable. And the INTP keeps their life more sustainable, more consistent. It literally conserves and protects it. But when these are negatively reinforcing each other, ENTJs feel trapped. I can't do things, because the INTP is always warning, like in a negative way, and kind of restricting the ENTJ. Or the ENTJ can't respect the INTP because the INTP isn't really doing much. It's so passive. So the ENTJ just feels like they're dragging an INTP with them. So this is where the negative kind of way they can reinforce each other. The inferior function. Okay, we're heading to the last function here. So the last function, which is the feeling functions, and this is the most kind of critical tension point, because the inferior function is the function that we feel most insecure about. So if the ENTJ and INTP are triggering each other's inferior functions, that relationship will not work. So what happens to ENTJs and INTPs who are in a relationship and who don't have mature feeling functions? What happens is that they are in a battlefield. They are fighting each other over who is smarter, who is more intellectual, who is more successful, and who wins the last argument. And that's why I would say most of these golden pairs don't work. When you have mature feeling functions, the INTP actually provides the emotional validation that the ENTJ needs. And the ENTJ knows what they stand for, knows what they believe and what their identity is, so that when the INTP questions them and criticizes them, they don't take it personally. And the INTP really needs to respect how the ENTJ feels, because like if the introverted feeling feels not respected or not heard, it makes ENTJs more protective, which makes them more, you could say, even dominant and masculine and aggressive in a way. And if the INTP feels like their extrovert feeling is not heard, they're not appreciated for what they do for the ENTJ, they're not appreciated for the loyalty they provide for the ENTJ. What happens is that they just become apathetic. They are like, I don't give a shit. I don't care about you. Or like, I hope I don't care about you, because obviously I do, but you know, I'll just do my best to not feel like that. How does our gender expectations manifest with these types? Honestly, like ENTJ women are seen as strong, emasculating, dominant, maybe a bit too direct, you know, overconfident. So they are not the archetypical female, you know, type. INTPs are passive, indecisive. These are also not really like masculine traits. I really truly think when more mature ENTJ and INTP are together, if they would be not part of the society, they would be the happiest couple ever. Honestly, the amount of satisfaction you get from just the opposite functions, how they can really support each other, something super valuable. But again, when we are in a society, how the external sees that couple is really different, because it's like they really work differently than most of other people, both of them, in their own way. The thing is that the energy works between them, but from the external, it just looks weird and out of place. So I really think the ENTJ and INTP have to kind of just accept that and kind of just be happy and provide validation for themselves. So not to compare, like I said already earlier, the feeling functions are the core for these types to really work together. As a female ENTJ, I kind of have had to learn to develop the feminine side of me, and the INTP man has to learn to really develop their masculine side of themselves, which is again, mature masculinity is really providing that, being the rock for the woman when the woman needs it. So for an INTP, that can mean the intuitive sensing and intuitive thinking and kind of developing those functions that provide that kind of framework. So the golden pair itself is not always going to be like, okay, it's totally going to work out, it's a perfect pairing. It really isn't. It comes down to so many different factors. But if both ENTJ and INTP are self-aware, mature, and they can really have a communication that's open for each other and not take it as criticism, it's an amazing pair. The fact that they are so different in their just daily life, their rhythm, but still they prioritize the same things, it's just so valuable. But without that, it's the most amount of frustration. It's the relationship that can hurt you the most because it knows your weaknesses, because the opposite, you can also criticize them the most or hit them the hardest places because you know them, because you have the opposite function. So there's high potential for compatibility, but there's high potential for incompatibility in one way as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video, and please put in a comment what you would like to see and hear next. See you in the next video.